Okay, so the measurements that I'm using today are ones that I more or less have based on this bag that I had made as a sample a few years ago. So now we're gonna prep up the pocket fabric, and I'm going to measure all the way out the outside of the straps from here to here. And the reason being is, so this is 8 inches. From here to here is 8 inches. And down here it's the same, it's 8 inches. And the reason being is we're going to enclose the sides of the pocket in the seams, the inside seams, when we sew down the straps. Because we want it to look nice and clean on the inside. So we're kind of like, gets 2 birds with 1 stone, they say. So we do 2 things at once when we do the pocket. And so again, I'm going to measure 8 inches across, and that will give me enough extra fabric for a 1/2 inch seam allowance on both sides, and also another 1/2 inch to be enclosed within the seams. So the seam is here, but the pocket probably ends right here. And then lengthwise, I'm gonna measure, and it says it's 10. So I think I'm gonna just add an extra inch. So I have a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the top and a 1/2 inch seam allowance at the bottom. Did that make sense to you both? I'm gonna measure the pocket that exists. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 inches, a little bit. It's almost, like here it's 10 and over here it's 9 3/4, but again, handmade. It doesn't have to be perfect, especially because this is your first project, each of you, outside of making a pillow. So it's 10 inches, and I'm adding an extra inch when I cut the fabric, so it should be 11 inches because I want an extra 1/2 inch at the top and an extra 1/2 inch at the bottom. So if we do that, 1/2 inch, 1/2 inch, it's 11. So I've already cut the fabric. I had it prepped and ready. Here it is. And I decided to use 2 pieces of the same fabric, but you can use different fabrics if you want the lining fabric to look different. Sometimes that's a nice surprise when the lining fabric looks completely different than the outside fabric. Some people really love that. And or it could be a secret thing, or you could just use what like I did, just use the same. So it's going to be good side to good side. We're going to treat this more or less like we would if we were sewing a pillow. So I'm going to put a pin in each corner. And then I'm going to go to the machine, and I'm going to sew a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around it, leaving space at the bottom to turn it. And now I really just want to show you both what that's going to look like before I even get to the machine. So I'm going to draw the seam allowance on the pillow. I'm going to start here and maybe here. Okay, so I'm lining, and you don't have to do this. I don't want you girls to do this unless you think it's going to be too hard to maintain your 1/2 inch seam allowance without this kind of a guideline. You should be able to use the seam allowance exercise I kind of gave you, like use the tape on the machine if you can. Put a piece of tape at 1/2 inch on the machine throat, or use your eye if your eye can see it. But for the sake of the exercise, I'm just gonna sketch this out so you see where I expect you to sew the pocket pieces. It's really just a rectangle pillow that you're not going to stuff. I probably said that before. And this is so that we can have it be lined on the inside of the pocket so it's not raw fabric. Edge. I'm lining up the edge of the fabric with the 1/2 inch mark on the ruler. And taking the pins out of my way because the chalk doesn't like to jump the pins. I'm putting them back in to make it easy to keep the fabric together. I think I've said before there are a lot of people who don't like pins, but I really find them to be useful. Okay, so it's not perfect, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to start sewing here. I'm going to go over to the sewing machine. I'm going to start here. I'm going to sew this seam. I'm going to pivot. I'm going to sew this seam. I'm going to go all the way around it. And I'm going to set the camera up so you girls can see what we're going to sew. All right.